The paintbrush tool in Illustrator works a little bit differently than the brush tool in Photoshop. In this lesson, you'll learn about the paintbrush tool and also the blob brush tool, how to customize them, and what are the differences between the two. So I just have a new document here, landscape orientation, letter size, and if you click and hold, you'll see here paintbrush tool. The shortcut is B, and then Shift B is blob brush tool. So the paintbrush tool, if I just click and drag over here, it's going to draw a stroke out here. So basically what that is if I select the white arrow, the direct selection tool, afterwards and select it, you'll see it's added some anchor points. It's got paths in between the anchor points, and we can still adjust it after the fact like so. And we can also adjust the handles, the angle of those curves, and move the paths and the anchor points and so on. Now if I want to change the color of this, I could select it and then change it up here on the control panel, or down here on the bottom of the tools panel, I can select that and change it as well. It has to be selected though. If I had it not selected or deselected and change it to something else, it wouldn't work. So I'm going to go back to the paintbrush tool, and now any new shapes I draw or new paths I draw with the paintbrush tool will be in this color. So up on the top you see fill and stroke. So if I select that and just click and drag, it's going to get rid of the fill because the paintbrush tool doesn't have a fill. It just has the stroke or the color of the path with the points in between. We can click on stroke width up here. Let's just say I changed to 16 point, click and drag, and it's a lot thicker. You can change variable width. You can change styles. For example, we got a couple default here, and you can also click in the upper right hand corner, go to open brush library. There's a bunch of other ones in here as well. And so if I selected one of those, say this one, and click and drag, it will add that stylized path. You can also adjust the opacity. As far as style up here goes, if I draw with the paintbrush tool and then I select a style, it's not applying it. You can see down here. So how would I apply it to something? That's because it's deselected. If I just click and drag and then select it with one of the selection tools, then add a style, then it will add a custom style for us. And you'll notice when I draw this, these are all paths. So it has all these paths in here, even though we don't really need that if you just want the effect to look like this. And that's when we would use the blob brush. So the difference between the paintbrush tool and the blob brush tool, I'll show you here. So the blob brush tool, if I just click and drag, and let's say I'm making some kind of shape here, and I go over to the direct selection tool and select it, you notice now it's a little bit different. So see the difference is this has all these paths inside of it, and this, the path is actually around the edge and it has a fill. So the blob brush tool, you're just kind of adding to this shape, and then the points, the anchor points, and the paths in between are on the edge. The stroke is on the edge there. So I could actually add a stroke after the fact and make it larger so we can notice it here. All right, so that's the blob brush tool, and then just the regular paintbrush tool. That's the difference. You notice, regardless of whether you're using the paintbrush tool or the blob brush tool, whenever I draw something out and let go, it deselects it. So if we want to remain selected, all we have to do is double click on the tool over here in the tools panel. And then there's a couple options in here, fidelity between accurate and smooth, so what kind of path you want. Fill new brush strokes, keep selected, edit select paths. So if you go to keep selected and click OK, now if I just click and drag, you'll notice you've got anchor points and paths in between, and it's still selected. So if I draw this down here, that's still selected. And what's pretty neat is we could do this if we selected it earlier, but here we don't have to do that extra step. We can just keep drawing. If I hover over the edge here and click and drag, you'll notice it added to that. So it didn't deselect it. Let me turn that off. I'll show you the difference. So if I go to the paintbrush tool, uncheck keep selected, and then I just draw, and then I try to draw right on the edge to keep those points connected like that, you'll notice these are still two separate paths. So we would have to put them over each other, select them with the white arrow like so, and then go to Object, Path, Join, then it would join them. So if we don't want to have to do that, we can just go to Keep Selected, and then when we're drawing with the paintbrush tool here, just hover over an area and you can add to it. And you can keep the path going from the edge like so. So it's pretty useful. when you want to draw logos or illustrations. It's kind of freeform. Probably use a tablet to do some of these techniques with drawing with the paintbrush tool, but the mouse can work as well in certain contexts. So the blob brush tool, if I double click it, it has some of the same options here. It actually has some more options down here compared to the paintbrush tool. So we can change the size here instead. So I can make that larger. And then keep selected is checked up there. So now when I just click and drag, it's still selected. So when I click and drag again, as long as I go over it a little bit, then it adds to it. Instead of just adding a new shape, it adds to the original one. And again, you can adjust these after the fact. So you can adjust the curves right here even, and you can also adjust the anchor points. I have to deselect there. There you go. And then also the handles of those curves, and also where the points and the paths are. And one more thing about the paintbrush tool. Up here we have the size. Earlier we were going over 15-point round, for example. What's pretty neat though, what you can do is, if I'm just clicking and dragging like that, you can actually press the left or right bracket and it will actually change the width even after we've drawn it. So kind of like in Photoshop where you're using the brush tool and you press the left and right square bracket to resize the brush without having to go up to the top panel. We can do that in Illustrator and even after we've already drawn it. So I can press the right bracket, make it quite large and draw. I can press the left bracket, make it a little bit smaller, and so on. So practice using the paintbrush tool and the blob brush tool. You'll get better at it as you go along, and I will see you in the next lesson.